Today in my devotions, one of the verses that I read was 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 5. And it says this, "For we are not proclaiming ourselves, but Jesus Christ as Lord, and ourselves as your slaves because of Jesus." Now, this is Paul speaking, and he was like one of the greatest apostles. He wrote most of the books in the New Testament. Paul was an amazing guy, and he was a real servant for God. But he never allowed his position and what he did to become something that points to himself. He was always trying to point people to Jesus. And I think about myself. I've been many places in the world. I've spoken in a lot of churches and things like that. And sometimes I think that I use the word I and me too much. We have to be careful when we use those words, because those words tend to point to us. And we need to make sure that we're pointing people to Jesus. We need to make sure that we're exalting Jesus, raising him up and not ourselves. It's so easy. We do it without even thinking at times to bring attention to ourselves. But Paul is saying here that he wants people to see Jesus. He wants people to not see him. I heard somebody say one time, and I tried to have this attitude most of the time, and he said this: "When I'm preaching, I want people to see Jesus and not me." He says, "I basically want to be invisible because I want people to see Jesus and not me." It's so easy for us when we're listening to somebody or watching somebody to focus on them and not Jesus. And that's something that not only when we are speaking like I am now, I got to be careful, but when you're listening to somebody, make sure you never give the person that's speaking too much credit. Because if they're truly speaking for God, what they're saying is not their words, it's God's words. God's using them, God's speaking through them. And that should always be our desire, is that God works through us and that other people see Jesus in us. They're not looking at us as a person, but they're seeing Jesus in us because of what Jesus has done for us. We need to exalt